All right, so let's let two more people in. Welcome, everyone. So good afternoon and welcome to the Quantum Safe Transition Working Group. We're really excited today to have two speakers from QryptoCyber, Jeffrey and Peter, who have got up really early this morning to join us. So thank you both for doing that. We're based in Australia. So in Australia, we always give a welcome to countries. I'll start off with our acknowledgement of countries. So we acknowledge the Palawa and Pakana people as the traditional, original and continuing custodians of Lutruwita, which is Tasmania, and the continuing connection that Tasmanian Aboriginal people have to the land, sea, sky and waterways. And we pay our respects to elders past and present. And this is an overview of today's session. So today's session will have some, we always start off with some introductions, so we have an idea of who's in the room, and then we'll have a presentation by Jeffrey, Duran and Peter Clay, and some discussion. So this is a part of the Tasmanian Quantum Network, and our goal is to foster a quantum technologies ecosystem here in Tasmania, and we were founded in 2023. And TQN is underpinned, we're guided by the Global Sustainable Development Goals in all we do. Okay. And the Quantum Safe Transition Group, working group, is one of a number of groups we have with the Tasmanian Quantum Network. We've got an education group and an industry group, business strategy, and a youth group. And our mission. Sorry. Okay. I missed that. Did somebody speak then? Okay, I'll keep going. So the mission of this particular group is to provide a forum to support the transition to quantum safe encryption by exchange of expert knowledge and skills, and through the practical testing of tools designed to support the quantum safe transition. The guidelines of our group, it's an open group. All information shared within this group is open source and in the public domain. All participants are asked to identify themselves and all meetings are recorded. Okay, so we'll just go around and I will stop sharing there and we'll just have a quickly go around the room. I'll ask Jeffrey if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Jeffrey Duran. I came into cybersecurity after leaving Army Cyber Command. I was there in 2010, went over to a company called Imitas, which was this first orchestration client where I met Pete. And we've worked within a bunch of different cybersecurity vendors over the years. The last couple of years, I was with Quintessence Labs there in Australia, and formulated some of the issues that Pete has been addressing from the quantum risk side. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Pete.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pete Clay. I have spent about 25 years now in cybersecurity. My career has been broken up into basically three different things that I seem to circle around or do a triangle around. Number one is I'm currently on my third go around as a Chief Information Security Officer. I have been a Chief Information Security Officer for some large multinational global companies, and currently am a Chief Information Security Officer for a company called Arion, which does space-based monitoring of all air traffic globally. Second third of my career has really been spent around doing large cybersecurity engagements for the U.S. federal government, for large multinational financial institutions, and for global companies. That has brought out or included a number of different things, everything from doing a risk assessment to doing the implementation of technology, processes, and tools. The final thing, and probably my favorite part of it, is every couple of years I decide that corporate America is a cruel and evil place. And so I go off and just start my own cybersecurity company. And so currently my current employers are very kind to allow me to do my 11th through 12th cybersecurity side ventures along with Jeff.
It's very impressive. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pete. Jawad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jawad, and I'm from here, Tasmania, Hobart. Moved from Riyadh. I'm just looking for some work as an opportunity in my field. I've been working as a project manager in Saudi Arabia, and I have an experience in software quality assurance, technical support, project management, PMO office establishment, and basically some consulting experience as well, which was financial consultancy, providing services to different clients based on their requirements. Basically, it was qualifying and preparing them for capital markets. And as per the IT policies and procedures and IT system implementation in their respective fields, I was providing my services. Here I'm new in Hobart. Just want to get into some knowledge-based groups and some discussions where I can seek any opportunity if there is any. Hello?
Uh-oh. I think we have some more technical
Thank
difficulties.
you very much, Jawad.
Oh, there you go.
Can we have Fireflies.ai? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, looks like she dropped. Weather was bad over there. Ming, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Min from Taiwan, and my company is called the Chopis Quantum Corporation. So our company is founded.
Sorry.
And I just started to introduce myself. Okay. Yeah, I'm Min from Taiwan, Chopis, and we founded at 2017, and already have a few portfolios, but many start from PQC algorithms. So we are joining the standardization team on many different kind of algorithms, both from N-true, prime, N-true, and UOV, Mayo, Sonova. So we have a ecosystem on PQC algorithm research team in Taiwan, and also partner with Academia Sinica in Taiwan. So we founded one quantum safe migration center. You can find it at qsmc.org at 2023 August. So we also a PQC chip innovation project hosted by Taiwan governments. It's very important partners to help to doing the awareness and doing the workshop and doing some skill and technology promotion in Taiwan. So we also joined the very well-known organization in the US, MITRE PQC Coalition, and the Linux post-quantum cryptography co-package in Linux Foundation. So I think we have almost 50 years old on algorithm design, especially on the crypto algorithms, to help the customers can using fast but secure algorithm. And we also a standardization team with NIST. So today I'm here I think I want to have an opportunity. Maybe you can share our knowledge and extending our workshop or some ecosystems with Australia. And the last, you will see soon, we signed in an MOU with University of Queensland, the team of QryptoCyber. So Ryan Guo leading that group. And we will sign in an MOU to exchange more quantum safe related technology. And also we're hosting some forum, some product joint development together. So yeah, looking forward to find more opportunities and to see what kind of thing we can do in this group. And I'll also have two colleagues, Sharon and Ellie, in this group as well. So yeah, happy to meet you today.
Thank you, Ming. Sorry, I dropped out there. Okay, where are we up to? Chelpies, have you introduced yourself yet?
Yeah, I think Jovis is from my company. So Eddie and Sharon is all from our teams.
We've got Richard from IDQ. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself quickly? And we'll get started.
Yes, hi, how are you? It's me, Richard from IDQ, based out of Dubai. I'm the regional director for Middle East, Africa, and parts of Asia, Australia. And yeah, looking forward for an interesting session. Hope to learn something new. So probably most of the people here know us. I did a speech last week. We talked a bit about QKD and the defense in depth approach with PQC and QKD together. So yeah, hopefully it will happen soon. And yeah, I'm pretty interested to hear from you guys, what you guys have to say, how you see the things happening. Yeah. Looking forward to the presentation.
Right, thank you. Yeah, we usually go around quickly so that the presenters know who's in the room and who they're speaking to. I think we just have Sandro, if you're able to introduce yourself, and then we'll just check that there's anyone else who still hasn't introduced themselves yet, and then we'll get started. So Sandro.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. I hope that you can hear me clearly. I'm currently in an occupied space, yeah, my name is Sandro Bilbrick. I'm a psychological coach with a deep-rooted interest in quantum, everything quantum, so from quantum physics to quantum technology. I'm trying to get started in this field as well when it comes to research and understanding what it is about. So I'm very, very much looking forward to the knowledge shared in this workshop and how this yes, and to learn some interesting things about the future of tech and quantum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandro. Now, is there anyone else that I have missed who hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves yet?
Pete Owen is down in there. He has to speak now because he works with us.
Okay.
Yeah, I should. Full disclosure, yeah, that's right. There's another crypto cyber person online. That's myself. So you can tell by my accent, I'm actually from Australia, based out of Melbourne, and have been working with Jeff and I both work together at Quintessence Labs, and have been working with Pete for over the last year on various things. And so, yeah, very pleased that, and I'm sure everybody will get a lot out of it.
Great. Thank you very much. And my name is Maria Roberts. I'm the founder of the Tasmanian Quantum Network. All right, so without any further hesitation, let's get started. Jeffrey or Peter, if you'd like to share your screen, you should be able to do that.
All right, let's see, Jeff.
All right,
I will
I
go
got
ahead. Okay. Really in starting this, let me kind of set a little bit of the stage and give everybody a little bit of thinking about where we're kind of coming from. I am not nearly smart enough to understand quantum cryptography or quantum beyond kind of the outskirts of Schrodinger's cat and wonder at those amazing things. What I do, though, every single day is I manage global networks where we are dependent upon cryptography. And I understand how to build secure systems and what that means. Now, that means I work with very, very strange people that are developers, that are network engineers, that are lawyers, that are all sorts of things that play in the cybersecurity world. So when Jeff and I first started really talking about this problem, I think my response was like a lot of chief information security officers, which was, this is not on my list of things to do today. Since we've started this call on my main work job, I've gotten 6 emails telling me about problems that are going on. And yes, this is a bank holiday in the US, but those are still 6 things that I have to deal with today. So my job is never ending and never stopping, and quantum doesn't make that list of things I have to do today. Nope, not really interested. No, this is a 15-year problem. By that time, I'll be retired. I'll be yelling at kids and dogs to keep off the lawn. Let's just not worry about this, right? This will be somebody else's problem. Except we have some fundamental issues. And those issues make it very much a today problem. Number one, 93.6% of the world's money does not exist outside of a computer. That's globally. Doesn't matter what country you're in, 93.6. What's the primary method of protecting the currency and the monetary supply? It's cryptography, right? It's cryptography both in motion and at rest. We have this really cool thing now called cloud computing that has just taken over the world, and it's a huge deconstructed computer, and it's really, really important to everybody. And what is the authentication based off of? Cryptography, right? How I know that I'm talking to the right thing is via cryptography. Cryptography is in everything that we do in a modern environment, everything. So really the lessons of our talk today, I wish Jeff and I were smart enough to do what most of you guys do. I'm simply not. I'll let Jeff speak for himself. But what we do know how to do is how to position this and how to protect the data that we have today, because we understand a couple of things about how cryptography is used. The first thing, Jeff, we go to the next slide. The first thing we'd like to understand is this is not a new problem. Not a new problem at all. Jeff, there we go. In World War II, there was someone, Admiral Yamamoto from the Japanese Imperial Navy, started the war games and started the planning in 1936 that would culminate in the Japanese taking over basically almost a third of the world's surface in about 18 months. The Allies feared him, feared his strategic sense, because he built a purpose-built machine, the Japanese Imperial Navy, that was able to accomplish that in rapid time, defeat the U.S. 7th Fleet at the time at Pearl Harbor, and just able to pull off a series of stunning moves that set everything back, or set the United States and the Allies back on their heels for 18 to 24 months. He was considered a strategic asset. Admiral Yamamoto did ask the question, why did the Allied scout planes always seem to find our fleet? We did that at we did that at the Battle of Midway. We did that at several of the battles around Australia. He suspected that the Americans had broken the Japanese Purple Code, which we actually had we'd partially broken it in 1938. And interestingly enough, we had been collecting Japanese diplomatic and military messages for at least the preceding 8 years assuming we would be able to break the code at some point. So in 1938, a Lieutenant Commander Joe Rochford, working out of Washington, D.C., partially breaks the Japanese code. Yamamoto, 5 years later, is asking the question, why do the Americans always find our fleet? Admiral Yamamoto says, tell our forces at Balal Island, I'll be there 0745 tomorrow, and the rest is history. Next slide, please, Jeff. The Allies intercepted this. By that point, we were able to break that kind of communication in near real time. We were able to send out long-range fighter planes that ambushed Admiral Yamamoto's plane and shot it down, killing one of the true military geniuses of World War II and depriving Japan of one of its processes. There are multiple lessons here and multiple lessons to really think through. Number one, everybody believes that cryptography is safe until it isn't. I will posit that the real brilliance of Bletchley Park and the work that went into breaking the German Enigma codes was not the building of the first computer, pretty mind-blowing thing, was not all the work and thought that went into actually breaking what was considered to be an unbreakable code. It was actually the development of game theory to prevent the Germans from ever knowing that the code was broken and maintaining the strategic advantage over time. So that's going to bring us to our first lesson. The first lesson is whoever breaks this from a quantum perspective isn't going to announce it to the world. They're going to use it, and they're going to take every advantage they can from it because they've been harvesting information for the last 10 to 15 years that they will begin decrypting and finding out all sorts of things. So what's at risk here is exactly what we talked about at the very beginning. A modern car, even not the really high-end cars, has over 340 addressable computers or computing components in it. Our monetary supply, 93.6, doesn't exist outside of a computer. It's secured by cryptography, both in motion and at rest. Personal communications may be of less interest to a nation-state actor, but they're still there. All of those things are going to be vulnerable and available when someone does it. But the first thing you have to get across to people is just because there isn't going to be the big bang of we now have the quantum cryptography question broken, we're going to break it, we're going to do it, we're going to move forward. No one's going to make that announcement. It will go on for 3, 4, 5 years while other nation states either figure it out or continue to gather the information that they will be able to access. The second thing is, it's hard to believe something when you feel so secure in it. RSA has been the foundation of that we have built all of these fantastic things on. So what's at risk is not just, I'm going to collect the information and decrypt it. When we started talking about cloud computing at the very, very beginning of this, how does one machine authenticate to another machine? How does one part of the cloud talk to a different part of the cloud? So when we started thinking about this problem, we really understand a couple of things. There's not going to be a Q day. There will be a very secret, quiet Q day as more and more capabilities are built. Okay. There will be an in-depth understanding that moves from let's decrypt the information that we've been gathering for the last 10 to 15 years, right? To let's be able to do this in real time. And the disruptions are not just going to be limited to financial systems that will be significant. It will also be to blockchain tools, which are heavily based on cryptography. It will be to our OT networks, power, organizational grid, autonomous vehicles, autonomous things. It will be to air traffic control, Space Command, the list goes on and on and on. So much more so than a lot of other things that maybe get a little bit more press around what's going to happen here. And Jeff, if you'd move to the next slide, please. Much more than the things that get all of the press, we have to understand, just like all of these historical examples, and you can actually trace this going back to Roman times and pre-Roman times, the collection of information, assuming that we will break the cryptography code at some point. This is a very, very old behavior. Nothing new. We always believed it was unbreakable until it simply wasn't. And then it had to be proven to us that it absolutely wasn't. We have a different challenge though. And the challenge is not what I heard a lot of you folks working on and doing. The challenge is really, really specific. Most people, and particularly when you start talking about large global networks, don't know where all the cryptography is. It is so embedded in so many of our systems, it isn't about just going out and running a simple scan of your website and figuring out what TLS SSL certs have to be replaced. The issue goes far deeper than that. And if you're going to create an inventory of your crypto so you can begin a rational process to change it out, you have to go out and find all of it. Now, as someone who has spent their time as a chief information security officer, the fastest way to get thrown out of my office with some degree of violence is to come in and say, you have a huge problem. You can't, I'm not going to tell you how to fix it until you pay me as a consultant. That does no good. You have to be able to put these problems and these threats, particularly in the context of my day-to-day experience. Now that I have 7 emails at 2:30 in the morning that I'm going to have to go deal with after this call, I have to be able to put the quantum cryptography piece of this in context of that day-to-day activity. How am I going to allocate resources against this when ransomware is a real concern, when denial of service is increasing in virulence? Well, how am I going to think about this, and how am I going to work through those problems? So context is king. What data is at risk? Where is it at in my network, and what's going on? So now that we understand no crypto system survives the test of time, and nation states breaking encryption is nothing new, let's come to one additional layer of this process. We are going to use the term nation state a lot going through this talk. But I really want you to replace nation state with groups of nations. In a world that's as divided as we are, the academic sharing, as some of the guests that are listening in today, the academic sharing of the information necessary to create quantum computing or be able to brute force a breaking of asymmetric cryptography is being shared widely among groups of nations. So this, again, is not going to be a single nation like the US in 1945. We're the only ones with the atomic bomb. We're perfectly safe because for an unknown period of time, we're the only ones smart enough to build the atomic bomb. That means we tell the world what to do. 5 years later, Russia exploded its own atomic bomb. This is very much going to be a competitive space. So just the ability for me to decrypt your secrets doesn't alleviate the need for me to protect my secrets. And being able to understand that and put that together in a context means this is not going to be deploying a patch overnight. So what we understand right now, sitting here today, is our crypto systems are going to fail. For everyone that's out there saying interesting things about symmetric key cryptography, that's going to be the answer, that's going to be the answer. We don't know that. We don't know it. All crypto systems cannot survive the test of time. They will all be broken. But where does it all start? I have to understand cryptography in the context of my environment today and what my environment is likely to be tomorrow. And that means that groups like this are incredibly important, because the first part of understanding any issue and getting better is admitting that you have the problem, right? Jeff, if we could roll to the next slide, please. So we're seeing rapid acceleration of the quantum risk. In the last week and a half, we've seen multiple announcements that would lead you to believe that instead of being a 10-year problem, this is now more like a 12-month to 18-month problem. I can say, from having spent a lot of time working around governments, the speed at which governments are beginning to attack both sides of this problem. What can I figure out how to decrypt? What can I see of my opponent's information? And how do I protect my environment? That is speeding up significantly. That to me is a strong indication that this is not a 10-year problem. This is a 12-month to 24-month problem. And whether the announcement comes in 12 to 24 months or comes in 60, 72 months doesn't really matter very much. The vulnerability is today. So the threat is real today. The vulnerability is real today. Now, what are we going to do about it? Jeff, if you want to take the next section.
Yeah, so there's the follow-up on this, and this is why we put parentheses, quotations around quantum. It's not just quantum risk. So a quantum, computer, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is the primary focus of a lot of these threats. But it's really not just that. The way that we have to look at the risk of all these things is we've seen that those that attack encryption usually come from outstanding and from different angles. It's not always the same thing. They're looking at different ways. And if you look how things are broken, it's not necessarily a linear function, because we're looking at mem computing has some specialized circuits. There's machine learning, there's AI. And again, Shor's algorithms in 1994, there's been adjustments in mathematics, and each one of those things are going to be a state secret to those things that are looking to break it from a state standpoint. But we look at the state of encryption today, as Pete said, is just a dumpster fire. It is just an absolute mess. The fact that we assumed RSA would be in public key encryption would last forever goes against not only against history, but against common sense. From everything we do in the IT functions and infrastructures all based on encryption. That's the foundation. And I'm not talking that just, from just a Q-Day perspective here, but if you look at, say, like Moscow's theorem, and if you know Moscow's theorem, if not, I'll drop it into the chat here a little bit, but it's measuring quantum computing as a linear function. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's not. But what it's not doing is taking all the risk things that we're talking about and being able to apply those to the risk of where things go. Because we don't know anything about how it's going to be broken. I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of organizations and governments that might have some better clue than me. But the reality is you're going to have to be able to change not just encryption now, but encryption now for the rest of time. Because that's the way it should be, because as we've said, no cryptographic system lasts the test of time, nor should you trust it. And that's where we'll get into a little bit on the zero trust thing here in a little. So RSA is dead. We just haven't disposed of the body yet. The public key infrastructure that is out there, it's widely used, and it's prevalent across all nations and across all different kinds of infrastructure. And as Pete said, symmetric encryption is believed to be safe, but that's a bad assumption, because once we get into assumptions, then we go, yeah, it's going to lead us down the path of heavier risk. You have to take that all into account. So what are we going to go from here? So NIST released the new post-quantum cryptography standards, and they're going to put out a timeline in the near future, November, December, maybe when NIST puts things out in time, it'll be great. And again, this is US focused, and there's no reason that any other country should be following NIST other than it's a good benchmark to look at. Anybody wants to move forward, it's probably a lot faster anyway. But once NIST comes out for when they're going to deprecate RSA and how it's going to do, and again, I think to go back to what Pete is saying, this is a state-sponsored issue, right? There's not going to be quantum hackers or quantum ransomware anywhere in our near future. This is a state-sponsored thing. So most of your transactional data from, agencies and governments, a lot of that stuff is not of value to adversaries of states, right? It's those things that are crucial secrets that they're going to have to re-encrypt with PQC relatively quickly. And again, this is going to be super expensive. The US is putting 7.1 billion just to the non DoD systems to just try to get things changed. And again, go back to the basics, right? Encryption is everything we do, every transaction, every database, everything we do. Even your ATM is encrypted when it pings your bank to see if you've got cash. And whenever you put cash into a register, a lot of these registers now are all digital, so they're encountering all the different money. At the very least, it's hard to track. And again, with public key all having to change, you're going to have to take a look and see where all that stuff is. And again, unfortunately, hold on, there we go. Unfortunately, no one tracks encryption. Although there's very few. We've one or two that we've run across. They don't know what it is, and it's ridiculous that organizations have no idea where their encryption is running in their infrastructure and what it's doing. So it's going to be a fundamental shift from security organizations. Previously had used vendors and commercially available systems, and they checked that it was compliance. All right, go ahead. Forgot about it. Never came back to it ever. Now, every organization is going to have to track encryption from here on out. There's not going to be any way that we're going to be able to defend against what's coming. So now that NIST has released the post-quantum standards, what's next? So that kind of gets into what is this first step? Well, the first step across everything else is talking about doing your inventory and understanding and discovering what you have in there. We've kind of put this together as there's 5 pillars of cryptographic discovery and inventory. And again, the key piece on this is not if you have to do a full inventory if you're building a roadmap. You're going to build a roadmap off a partial inventory. Your budget's going to be off. Your time's going to be off. It's all going to be a problem child. So what we look at is number 1, external. And this is across the board of anybody else who wants to do encryption discovery and inventory. You have to look externally because even after you look internally, there's some things that might be broadcasting out of your organization of what's coming out of your network and what's there. Internally, you want to know where everything is crossing the network and going on. You want to know IT assets, and this is a very, very broad category, right? It comes from endpoints, applications, IoT devices, servers, all the things. Where's that encryption living? What is it doing? Again, then you're back to databases. All your databases, where are they? What value do they have to the organization? And finally, where's your code and your code libraries and what are calls going in on that? So all these things encompass the first things you should do in an inventory because you have to build some level of trust with what you have inside of your systems. And that's Pete's key to take it from here.
So before we dive into zero trust, and we will definitely kind of get into that, here's been our experience as we start to run the tool. We go in, we do the crypto inventory. We've done it for some really large networks, 100,000 node networks, etc. We have the same reaction every single time. It's not that people aren't doing their job. It's just that we're now up to 8 emails that I've gotten that I'm going to have to respond to. It's the immediate overtakes the important, right? So when we come in and we go through all of these sheets and sheets and sheets of things, that this is all the inventory, the cryptographic inventory that we discovered for you, here's the first question that's inevitably there. What is that? Where is that? How did you find what? I had no idea. I had where what tool is that?
10 Windows devices in Jamaica.
Right. How is that part of our network? You start from literally that position, right? When we started this journey and started really thinking about this, one of the things I would add to my list, because zero trust is a huge thing in the United States, particularly in the federal government. It's actually written into the regulation here. And I was saying quantum is going to, the quantum cryptography issues are going to break zero trust. In a very interesting, aggressive back and forth with John Kindervald, who actually created zero trust, he re-educated my thinking on that topic. Zero trust can provide the framework to protect against quantum, the defense in depth conversation that you had last week, right? Because all of those things working together can mitigate either the potential failure or the actual failure of cryptography. It can at least limit the damage. Quantum resilience, though, is a zero trust problem. And it is critical to understand that, because for everyone on this call right now that is trying to get the attention of the people that have a ticking email clock in their head, right? You have to start to attach this to the problems that they are fighting today. Zero trust has gotten enough currency in how people build networks, manage networks, and use networks that you can have the conversation with them about their zero trust environment and say, look, quantum computing is breaking quantum cryptography is going to be the challenge that changes how you implement zero trust. So why not get it right today? Next slide, please. The old way of thinking is zero trust looked like this, and it was all bound together with kind of a invisible GUI middle called cryptography. The minute we start to run tools to understand our cryptography inventory, we are going to find in most organizations hundreds, if not thousands, of additional vulnerabilities that have to be mitigated over time with the encryption that sits in the middle. And being able to understand that and being able to fix that is a question that is very much today's question. In working in the space industry, one of the enormous challenges that I get to think about and deal with every day is part of our system sits in space, in low Earth orbit, right? And one of the things that we do is once we gather the information from the aircraft, we encrypt the data coming between the spacecraft and the ground station to make sure that we have the integrity of the data coming in. Here's a hint to anybody that's thought about these problems for a little bit. Those spacecraft are going to be up there for 10 to 15 to 20 years. I have two problems. Number one, what's going to happen to the cryptography of the spacecraft talking to the ground station? Is that going to be deprecated? Does that mean that somebody else could authenticate and interrupt the flow of data? The answer is yes, potentially, if we don't do some other things. Number two, for the next generation of spacecraft, what cryptography can I put into space that will likely last until around 2050 that will actually manage the quantum computing problems and issues that we're talking about here today? The time horizon of how we think about tech has gone so far away from, let me just make it until Windows graces us with the next version of bug-ridden security issue computing in our operating systems, to how do I plan from 2024 to 2050 to ensure the safety of the system that I'm building? Thinking about that today, zero trust is something that we have to build into our systems, and we have to re-engineer how we're thinking about it and use other methods to achieve zero trust other than cryptography. Organizations implementing a zero trust strategy, which is not a solution. There's no zero trust magic tool out there. It's going through zero trust is always a process. But by implementing that, you can be prepared for the quantum future. So you have to start that process of thinking that way as an organization today. Next slide, please. Our approach is always to start from the outside in. External scanning tells you not just what your attack surface looks like, it tells you where you're using cryptography today. Remember, developers are potentially the sneakiest people on the face of the earth. They like to write all sorts of secret calls, puts, and everything else to use cryptography without ever telling anybody that they use cryptography. The minute you run the simplest possible scan to find cryptography where it lives on an external side, you will engender in your customers or in your organization, what is that? What are you looking, where do you get that from? Enable the internal scan is where you're really going to start to find the value in any tools or any processes that you find. Tying this in with the zero trust processes today will give your conversation about budget and capabilities and start to drive the solution rather than just be another thing sitting on a whiteboard that the next CISO will have to deal with. Being able to build it into the internal side and understand how it impacts your zero trust strategy and what you're doing is a critical function. But we have those sneaky developers and we have those strange people that live in San Jose, California that write code that uses cryptography in interesting ways without really telling anybody. We have cloud computing issues and cloud computing environments that are fully dependent upon cryptography. You have to continuously verify your environment. This is no different than organizations that run vulnerability scans, that run patching. This is an ongoing visibility exercise that you have to be able to maintain. As you deploy new things, as you add new things, you're going to find new issues. And visibility is the very best disinfectant that I know of. Maintaining that consistent inventory over time in the US is actually a regulatory requirement now for the federal government. It's got to be built into your capital planning, it's got to be built into your tactical planning, and it's got to be built into your processes. Next slide, please. You have to be able to do the inventory to get to the rest of this. This is definitely a journey. You have to understand your encryption surface. You have to understand how that encryption surface is going to impact your data or your operations. You have to be able to quantify that risk in a way that makes sense to your organization. Whether you use the Pete made a guess risk assessment method, because Pete's got to have the risk assessment done in the next 12 hours because the auditors are coming, or you use the FAIR method, or you use some brilliant Bayesian analytics, or however you do risk assessments, you've got to be able to quantify this in terms of how you do risk assessments. And the foundation of that is to get and maintain that cryptographic inventory. Assess it. Establish the roadmap. None of us live by ourselves anymore. And we're going to tell that story in the last slide, both in terms of time and space. None of us are alone in this journey. We have to understand what's going on with our supply chain, both in terms of our computing supply chain as well as our data supply chains. Prioritize the new risks. I have worked with NIST and been around NIST for 20 plus years of my career. There are brilliant minds at NIST that are working on these problems. They provide light in some very, very dark places when it comes to cybersecurity. But the idea that they got it right the first time with the 3 algorithms they just published, and the right that and Jeff can back me up on this, sitting on stage at RSA 2 RSAs ago, and NIST was going, it's going to be out this summer. And I was like, it will be out the summer of 2024. NIST you just add 12 months to everything that NIST has ever said. Because they have to be right. That is a risk mitigation process that they must go through. So we have to be able to build in crypto agility in order to be able to address this problem. Because guess what? All crypto has a time life, has a time to live, right? Whether it's a year, whether it's 10 years, whether it's 30 years, whether it's 50 years, we have to be agile with what we build today. Controls, operationalized policies. We have to start talking to all of these different people that build our networks and build our capabilities and build the understanding of what we do and how we do it. We have to integrate it into our programs. So that visibility, we have to start to pull forward into the environments, not just in the extreme cases of what am I going to do with cryptography that lives on spacecraft for the next 25 years, but what am I going to do with the tech deployments that I make today? Because most of us built networks in the 80s and 90s, fully expecting them to be replaced in the next 12 to 18 months. When you start to think about that over 90% of all email, the most ubiquitous communication form on the face of the earth, crosses a mainframe computer at some point, you begin to understand that what we build today will outlive our expected time to live by, in some cases, decades. Begin the transition of critical data assets. That is so important. If I don't have cryptography to authenticate, if I don't have cryptography to protect, if I don't have cryptography to maintain my confidentiality, how am I going to do that? What am I going to do? That means out of the 1,150 some odd controls in NIST, we're going to have to change the weighting of how we think about these things, and we're going to have to build architectures that we don't fully understand today. Zero trust is the strategy, but how we put them together is going to be the key and the critical function. And then how do we build agile cryptography into the program where it's feasible? If you take nothing else away from, and you think I am the most boring, idiotic speaker ever, and that's entirely possible. Jeff tells me I am all the time. He's very, very hard on me. Never trust, always verify. You cannot ever believe that you are safe if you're going to be safe in this world. You have to think about this, and you have to. Now, I go through value conversations all the time. What's the return on investment of what I'm doing? What's the return on investment with the clients that we're working with? We have to really think about it. But do not wait for the regulatory landscape to change to tell you what to do. Regulations are a response to a bad thing happening 2 to 5 years ago. If you don't believe me, look at the regulatory responses to AI right now. We have been living in an AI environment since 2000, since basically a public AI environment, since Apple and released Siri, since Alexa came onto the market. Those are all truly machine learning and AI applications. How many laws and regulations are out there today? Technology waiting until the regulatory change says you must do this is a guaranteed way to fail. You have to think about this in advance. The next slide, please. How does it work? Find crypto to fix it. The people on here that are working on QKD pieces, the people on here that are working on the cryptography and the algorithms, thank you. Thank you for what you do. You are helping us solve a problem. What we have to do now as the owners of networks and the securing of networks is we have to do active scanning. We have to get into the registry of systems to understand how cryptography is being used, because those developers are truly sneaky creatures that do all these interesting calls with cryptography all over the place. If we go talk to somebody and say, I'm going to install a completely new system and it's going to do all this wonderful stuff for you, and it's going to gather all this information, and it's going to put it in context of my system and my system only, as a CISO, I'm going to boot you out of my office even faster than if you just come to me with a set of problems. You're going to get the boot. You have to be able to take advantage of the tools and the available information that already reside in the network. Do not forget around application and database scanning. Second only to the sneaky developers that like to hide cryptography everywhere are the database developers that love to make puts and calls with cryptography in their systems. So this isn't just going out, downloading Nmap, running it to find all of your certs and saying, voila, I've done it. You've got to be able to look in all of these different places to actually solve the problem. Next
And
slide,
provide
please.
context to it.
And provide the context. Where does my data live? Is a database more important than a router? Jeff, you want to take this? I am running out of breath.
Sure. This is just an overview of, again, what we look at from the cryptography side of where we're putting things together. And there's a lot. And I think that's the most thing that the other big takeaway is the cryptographic supply chain and the cryptographic infrastructure that lives in any network is huge. There is no realistic way to do this manually. It's just not possible with the amount of labor hours that you would have to spend in any large network, just trying to figure it out and pouring through logs and trying to aggregate some of the stuff. It's, and because we've looked at it and it's very difficult. And hats off to all the other folks that do the same thing that we do, because it's tough. It's tough to do all that. But again, as we were just talking with that, it's the context that really matters, and being able to aggregate that data, prioritize that data, and give you something that looks smart enough to say, okay, this is the most important stuff that I've got to get done. The rest of this stuff can wait until 2035. And that's going to be the case because some of the stuff's going to be hard. I mean, even the U.S. Navy still uses Windows XP. There's going to be a lot of things that are on this list here that are still going to be a problem 10 years from now. Why? Because it's written into silicon, it's written into spacecraft, it's written into all these other sorts of other things. It's all of these other things that are going to be able, you have to be able to understand from an inventory standpoint on figure out how you're going to do a roadmap based on what that priority is. And again, going back to what Pete was saying with the regulatory piece, this is NSM 10, which is a national security memo from the United States. This is kind of what we are based on, because a lot of folks are worldwide following NIST, or at least paying attention to what they're doing, and especially the hard work that they're doing, and the MITRE folks that are busting their working very hard to make sure that they get things done as well as they can, because they can't be wrong. Again, they have a lot of stress upon them, and they've put out a lot of good work. And again, and I know there's some other folks that are out there that do the same thing. This is how we look at it. We do all these things based on that. And again, simply put, we find the encryption, we classify it, and you score the risk, because it's a risk piece that's very important to be able to talk business context. Everybody still, in most organizations, from EDU to .mil to organizations that are financially motivated, everybody's got to be able to understand from a business standpoint or an operational standpoint, why is this real risk and why do you need to spend time and money on it? Well, the reality is you're going to have to, because of the value of that data to nation states. Finally, let me put it back to you. Again, we talked, here's Pete, and here's Pete's background as we're wrapping up here. Um, eh, not much else we can talk about we haven't talked about already. Here's our other leadership team. And Pete Owen here on the call is also on this point. And Pete, you want to talk about our final quantum
Yep.
entanglement?
I promised at the end of it, we would talk about the quantum entanglement at the end. In 1934, and I know most of you are not US, maybe you've heard of Bonnie and Clyde, very famous American bank robbers from the 1930s. In Bienville Parish, the notorious gangster couple were ambushed by law enforcement officers. My wife's grandfather owned one of the rifles that was loaned to one of the police officers that executed the ambush. In telling that story, I actually have the rifle. It's sitting in a different room at the moment. Yes, it still works. It's still awesome. John Gasquet, whose picture you just saw, his grandfather actually took all the pictures from that day. And so the quantum entanglement here is somehow we ended up working together 2 generations later with this obscure connection happening in Bienville Parish. But, for people that are far more famous than we will ever be, by essentially running around shooting people and robbing banks, right? The reason we get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and the reason we want to come here is not to sell you something. Quantum entanglement is real. This is a real problem, and I can guarantee that over the next 5 years, what will happen is we will all touch each other either directly or indirectly in a way that we either perceive or don't. But what we do will change what you do. What you do will change what we do. And so understanding the interconnectedness of this and without getting too metaphysical about it, but understanding why it's important for us not just to talk to you, but also for us to hear back from you, because that's part of what we get out of doing these things too, is understanding how is this risk perceived local to where you are. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to call on a couple of folks just to get them to kind of give the feedback, and we'd love to get either validation or you guys are completely insane, and we hope that Mira never invites you back again. Is that okay, Mira?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jeffrey and Pete. That was really interesting. And certainly, let's get some discussion going.
Richard, you seem like you cross about a third of the globe there. I'd love to get any comments you have back on what you're seeing in terms of what is the risk and how are your markets reacting to this?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, basically, we see the same thing. The analysis is the biggest issue, and a lot of people we talking to, they're not really aware, and they're not aware where they use certain algorithms. So there's a lot of education has to be done, and often when I travel and I'm talking with the people, I see like sometimes you talk with them and you start talking about quantum threat in general, and it's like they think you're talking about science fiction. So
Right.
for them, it's like still far away. And then because now, especially if you look in the Middle East, AI is the big buzzword. And they're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of threats coming from AI. And I'm like, yeah, you guys underestimate quantum, actually the quantum threat. And especially they're like, oh yeah, quantum computers, it will take some time. It's not now, but exactly what you guys said. How is now decrypt later attacks, and nobody will announce on LinkedIn, Facebook, or in some newspaper, oh, we have a quantum computer, we can break classical encryption. It's exactly what you guys saying. It is a political race. It is some silent Q day. It will happen because the moment you have a quantum computer which can break classical encryption, it's not something you put out. It's something you will use as long as you can for yourself to be ahead of all the others. And what we also see and what we see basically when we're talking with financial institutions, when we're talking with the telcos, etc., is there is no solution standalone. Let's say there is no only QKD. There is not only PQC. You have to do like a hybrid approach. You have to gradually replace these classical algorithms, which will take some time. It's not done overnight. It will take a lot of time until you have replaced them, etc. And you also have to put QKD wherever you can do it, secure your network infrastructure, and put on the application layer, etc. Put the PQC algorithm step by step. The question is also how long these algorithms will be secure, because NIST already know that they have to work on them to come up with new algorithms, because we don't know how long they will be secure. So we see probably that every few years there will be a change in the algorithms. And also the problem is these algorithms getting more and more complex, which might need more processing resources, etc., to become secure. So it's quite challenging times. And certain area in certain areas in the world, the people are aware. Others, they still see it like as far away, we not really care about it. But if you look to certain parts of Asia, Europe, also in the US, there you see a lot of things happening. Other places, they're like, let's see, we're gonna wait what's happening. So it's pretty interesting, pretty complex, quite challenging.
Sandra, what are you seeing in your market space?
Thank you very much for asking. It's as a psychologist, it's very interesting to me to understand people's reactions to these changes, and this is also partly what I'm trying to base some of my research on. And some of the initial findings, as well as discussions and interviews with people, really resonate with what we have learned today. Is that many people are uncertain about technology in general and the rapid advancements, and it seems that it's there's a parallel to be seen there with the degree of knowledge that people have. So it's the initial reaction after learning about quantum and the fact that we are using this fundamental building block of the universe for our own technology, for our own technological advancement, and for the economy, but also participating in this race while we really do not know so much the direction that it will be going in. And I've been cooperating with one, he's a business partner of mine, but he's also now a good colleague and friend, and he's working on quantum computers himself, partially. And so some of the insights that he has shared with me is very interesting, in particular when it comes to the quantum and AI and the superpositions and how it relates to some of the functions that even going beyond cryptography, which at that point you can only really guess which directions it will go in. But even cryptography, which is just this huge field of concern and uncertainty. So there's a lot of there's a big question mark there, and I believe that a lot of people would like to, as you say, have maybe a more guided approach with an initial assessment and testing stages and preparing regulatory regulatory rules and regulations in advance before sort of jumping headfirst into this unknown topic. And I believe that having discussions like these is really the first step in doing so, and the first step in creating awareness. So it's good to see that there's a lot of focus on that market as well. But as it comes to the general population, most of them are either unaware or very uncertain about the advancements on this.
Thank you. Is your research going to be available anywhere? Because I would actually be fascinated to read it and see it, because I have, as Jeff alluded to at the beginning, I have a very uninformed opinion that human beings are the worst risk assessment engines on the face of the earth. And I think this may be a case in point. So is your research, do you plan to make your research available at any point?
Yes, absolutely. So it's in the early piloting stage. I have a survey which I can also share in this group. It's a very basic psychology survey with standardized questions, as well as some initial questions about how much do you know about quantum, how comfortable do you feel about it, and so on and so forth. And I plan to cooperate, or I'm currently in the stage where I try to cooperate with as many experts in the topic as possible and get into contact with organizations. So it's very much in the early stage, but yes, I do plan on making it public and also continuing to do research on quantum and the psychological aspect of quantum as much as possible in the near future.
Please keep me on your distribution list. I would be fascinated to see that as we move forward.
Super cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mr. Liang, do you have thoughts that you would care to share? I'm losing the ability to speak. It's now 3 a.m. here. May have stepped away. Mr. Owen, the amazing continent of Australia.
Hello. Hey, it's interesting there listening to everybody. Hey, just picking up just something you said there, Sandro, just about the concept of it being a little bit scary, the whole concept, the whole thought of it. And it's a really interesting thing that you said that, because what happens is in talking to organizations, large and small and everywhere in between, and whether they're public sector or enterprise, you know, that the basic problem you got is the statement of the subject matter problem is too big for them to conceptualize. And so if you work it back from that, and the human nature part then comes into it, you know, it's, you know, are you prepared for Q day? You know, that's just too big a problem statement. And so the whole concept of being able to then to understand and break it down, but through this discovery type of your cryptographic assets process, and then really getting into the nitty-gritty of definition, is what really brings it and gives it some level of sanity. And so then the really interesting things, I suppose, from a local perspective, and I think these run through all around the world, is if you look at, and just picking up on some things that Pete said earlier on and just reinforcing it, if you look at the evolution of cryptography, it was never holistically planned. There may have been tactical planning in an application needed some encryption or remote access, or when a network was built, it had certain encryption built into it for ingress and egress points and different things like that. But nothing was ever holistically looked at. And because of that, so many people within, even in a medium-sized organization, have something to do with encryption. Okay. And so therein lies part of the challenge. And so that challenge then moves into the cultural sort of side, because of all these people that may be involved and they haven't really been talking to each other when they've done their own thing, the chances of them actually getting there together and having some synergy between their activities and what they did is sort of actually highly unlikely as a result of that. And so the whole concept, and this is where Jeff and I and Pete were working together last year around building a lot of this out that you saw presented today, was around how do we define that in a more detailed manner, in the sense, and it takes the fear factor away from it, because the reality is that once you sort of contextualize something with respect to what the problem is for a particular organization, and you really understand it, then you can start prioritizing your risk components of it, and where are the crown jewels or the intellectual property that's so important to that organization? Where are they? Are they at risk? Things like that. And then you can start getting in and start developing strategies and tactics around dealing with that. And you'd be surprised at how simple some of the things that you can do to actually fix these problems. Now, if you look at history in our industry, and Pete went through, and this is a history repeating itself exercise. But if you look at some other history, like things like then when we thought the industry was going to run out of IP addresses, and so there was a big panic to go from IPv6 to IPv4 to IPv6. That was like 25 years ago, believe it or not, when that sort of first came out. The whole, when you look at things like the evolution of desktop computing and how you had this explosion of power within the desktop, and had Moore's law really applied to that, and the same thing applied to networking as well. And so what happens is all those lessons in history are going to repeat themselves in the area of quantum. And every one of those things, it all got down to okay, let's really understand what we're trying to do. Let's have good design, good planning. That all relies on really good information. And I think that's the process that we've come to with being able to get down to this level with a cryptographic sort of discovery process and all the technology around that. Because once you sort of get to that stage, and as an example, I was at a conference late last year around this, and there was one of the things that popped out about that was mainframes within federal government, and the fact that within those applications, within the mainframes, all the encryption is actually built into those applications. How do you change that when it actually has to do with an entire country? Believe it or not, there's simple answers that you can just wrap them. So there's all these different sort of tactics that you can do, and you can go forward with confidence when you've got that level of discovery and that level of information. So I think it's a really important part of the quantum world to understand that. I think it brings clarity to it. It is, I think, a hybrid approach in terms of the solution that will be offered up to be able to deal with these things. Some of it will be maintaining different encryption schemas. Others could be architecturally based, making sure where the data is within the network, how it's accessed, those sorts of things. So again, that's then policy and process. And I think the really, really big thing will be the cultural components to it. If you think back at, this is another history repeating itself, think back at how long it took people to get used to multi-factor authentication. Okay, I remember when probably 20 years ago, people were trying to avoid it, and it probably took 10 years for two-factor authentication to get some level of acceptance. And then we quickly accelerated into a multi-factor authentication world. And now everybody accepts it. If you don't have it, there's something wrong, almost today. And so I think we're right at the beginning of that curve. And I think because of the speed of this technology, as it will accelerate, having that visible understanding and contextualizing that understanding, I think it's just a really important thing for the quantum environments and the quantum industry to be able to go forth knowing that.
Thanks, Peter. Do you think that the geopolitical situation makes things different for this one compared to some of the other transitions that have been going through, in that there is that real pressure? That was one point that I wanted to make. And the other one was when I was working at TASTAFE Cyber Innovation Hub, and we were delivering the Essential 8 program, I felt that if we could try and integrate some of those, the inventory at least, into the Essential 8 in some ways, because a lot of people will say, oh, we can't think, as you've mentioned, we can't think about the quantum. We need to do the Essential 8 first. But I really think we need to look at ways where the quantum safe transition becomes integrated with those frameworks. I don't know whether NIST are planning to do that in some way rather than it being a whole separate job, trying to find ways to weave it together, which I suppose is what you're doing with linking it with the Zero Trust.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned that, because our sister company, which is called the Risk Foundry, actually does the Essential 8, and part of the back end, the things that we do, we integrate the same sort of cryptographic inventory inside of the Essential 8. It's not included there normally with the 200-page document that we actually produce, but with that Essential 8, one of the things we do is we provide that anyway because we believe it's so crucial to that. We just add it in as a secondary as part of it. But definitely the going back to your first point, it's all geopolitical, right? It is everything that is around quantum is going to be those people who can afford, and it's got to be nation states that can afford to run quantum computers, unless there's some dramatic change in how quantum computing is done, which is not likely, but could happen. We don't know. We don't have a Mr. Fusion or your backpack fusion reactors yet either, or cold fusion. So who knows? These things are. But in the meantime, what we can realistically see is those nation states that are very aggressive in their intelligence apparatus being useful for their political gains, and that's where this all comes back to: is what organization is going to want that data and how could they use it? There are some state actors that are there that are just hoarders, right? They're data hoarders. The United States is one of them. China is another. We will hoard any piece of data that we can do, get our hands on, and it will just stay there forever. Useful? Who knows? We don't know. We're going to not go throw it away. I'm in Ashburn, near Ashburn, Virginia, which is the data center capital of the world. And literally we have you can't throw a rock without hitting a data center around this area. And that's where all this data is being stored in the United States wise. But the geopolitical piece is always going to be super intense. And that's why we're seeing this, again, push on where things are going to be. And you have to have your secrets say secret. Pete, did you have anything to add with that?
No, I think that the points that have been made, first of all, thank you everybody for sharing your perspectives and the local perspectives, right? Because to go back to your point, competition drives this faster than regulations will ever be able to keep up with. And the ability to do this, quantum computing will absolutely dwarf what we think AI will be able to do, et cetera, because it's going to be as fundamental a change as the difference between Charles Babbage's calculation machine and what was built at Bletchley Park. It's not comparable, and one couldn't almost recognize the other one, right? And so in this whole field, though, I think to kind of close out our part of it is, I have always said, I'm never going to be afraid of what I can see. I'm only afraid of what I can't see. Because across the course of my career, it was never the risk that I understood. It was never the risk that I had, at least in my mind, prepared for. It was always it was the failure of my imagination to conceive the risk, right? And to properly quantify it. It is so much that is important about this and what we're going to be doing, particularly for all the people that are on this particular call, for what we're going to be doing for the next 25 years will be driven much more by the quantum space than it will the AI space, because AI is actually far less mature at this moment than the quantum space is. Thank you so much for having us, and hopefully you found the talk both entertaining as well as useful to you. And thank you very much for having us. Please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We share a great deal of information there. If you have questions that you, like me, would never dream of actually shouting out in the middle of one of these, you can reach me on LinkedIn at your convenience. Or hopefully you'll be hearing again from us pretty soon in a neighborhood close to you. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. Peter and Jeffrey. Just quickly, I've got one question before you sign off, and that is, how many places are you actually implementing your tools at the moment that we can turn to or look to as examples of this already in action being implemented?
We just crossed, thanks to Pete Owen, we just crossed our third customer in Australia, so they're locally to you. In the Middle East, we are just signing up the very first distributors there. And in Europe, we are well down the road. We have our distributors signed up there. We're leaving North America alone for the moment, because again, this is a regulatory driven market. And so we find the better reception for this outside the US at the moment. I'm sure we will. I will quote, I believe I'm maybe bastardizing Winston Churchill on this one. America is brilliant at doing the right thing only after they've exhausted all of the possible wrong things. And so we will get there. But we're finding the reception outside. People understand the threats and risks better. Interestingly enough, the people that never believe that RSA, that never granted the RSA patent. So it's an interesting global issue. But I believe we're crossing our 41st customer a little bit later on today.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank
you, Pete. Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. Did you want to have any final words before we wrap up?
No, just thank you very much for having us and greatly appreciate it. Again, Pete Owens local, feel free to reach out to him. Otherwise, ping me or Pete on LinkedIn and happy to have a conversation as you need.
Great. Thank you very much, all of you. And thank you everyone for joining. And I'm sure this is a conversation that will continue. Thanks. Have a good
Thanks,
rest.
all.
Enjoy your.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.